The morning everything changed, started out soft and peaceful, the way southern mornings often do. The sky was a pale shade of pink, and a light breeze carried the smell of fresh-cut grass across my front porch. I stood by the kitchen window with my coffee cup in hand, watching the sunlight slowly warm the wooden floor. It felt like the kind of day where nothing bad could happen. The kind of day that begins with hope without asking for permission. I had no idea that before noon, a single sentence would settle into my life like a quiet storm. I had woken up early, earlier than usual, because my son James had mentioned the night before that he might stop by sometime in the morning. It wasn't a promise, but even a soft maybe from your child is enough to make you prepare. So I set the table, pulled out the good plates, and made a pot of coffee the way he liked it, strong, with just a little sugar. I even baked a small batch of warm biscuits, the kind he used to ask for when he was young. Mothers in the South know this well. Small acts of love are our way of staying connected. The house felt warm and alive as I moved around the kitchen. I turned on the radio, listened to a little old country music, and let myself feel excited at the thought of seeing James. He hadn't been visiting much lately. Not the way he used to, but I told myself every family goes through seasons. I kept building hope in small ways, like setting 2 mugs out instead of 1. Sometimes hope is nothing more than a cup waiting to be filled. Around 10 o'clock, I heard a car door shut. It wasn't loud, just soft enough to make me pause. I wiped my hands on the kitchen towel and peeked out the window, expecting to see James walking up the steps. But instead, standing all alone on my porch, was Hannah, my daughter-in-law. She wasn't smiling the way she normally did. Her shoulders were stiff, and her hands were clasped in front of her like she was holding something she didn't want to drop. I opened the door with a warm smile, the same smile I gave her every time. "Morning, honey," I said softly. "Come on in. You're just in time. I made coffee and biscuits." But she didn't step inside. She didn't even move closer. She just stood there looking at the porch boards beneath her feet like she was afraid to meet my eyes. That was the first moment I felt something tighten inside me. Something small and quiet. Like the first knot in a long string. "Everything all right?" I asked gently. She drew in a slow breath, like she was preparing to say something heavy. When she finally looked up, her expression was soft but troubled, and I could tell she had practiced her words before coming. Then she said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "May, we got married yesterday." For a moment, the world around us didn't move. Even the wind seemed to pause. I blinked once, twice, because I thought maybe I had misheard her. But she stood still, not correcting herself, not softening the blow. Her words were simple, but they landed with a weight I felt deep in my chest. "Oh," I said softly. It was all I could manage. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel shock. I felt something slow and deep, something like a quiet ache spreading through my ribs. It wasn't loud heartbreak. No, it was the kind that sits down gently inside you and refuses to leave. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay steady, and somehow found a smile. "Well, congratulations," I whispered. My voice wavered just slightly. She nodded, but didn't thank me. She didn't explain. She didn't apologize. She just stood there with her hands clutched together. I asked the only thing I could manage, "When and where?" She said, "At the courthouse, yesterday morning." I waited for her to tell me why. I waited for her to say something like, "I'm sorry we didn't tell you," or "It happened so fast." But she didn't. Instead, she added, "James is at work. He asked me to come tell you." Those words hurt more than the first ones. My son, the boy who used to bring me hand-picked flowers from the yard and call me when he had good news, hadn't come himself. He had asked someone else to deliver the news of his wedding. Not an invitation, not a picture, not even a call. Just a message. "Well," I said, forcing my voice to sound steady. "Thank you for letting me know." She nodded again, almost relieved that I hadn't made things harder. Then she turned, stepped off the porch, and walked away without another word. Her footsteps were soft, fading down the driveway, leaving the air still and heavy behind her. I watched her until she disappeared, then slowly closed the door. The warm house I had filled with hope just an hour earlier suddenly felt too quiet. I went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and stared at the 2 mugs I had set out. My biscuits were cooling on the counter. The coffee pot was still warm, but everything else inside me felt cold. I didn't cry, not then. My tears stayed locked somewhere deep inside, behind a wall I didn't know I had built. Instead, I sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. It was strange how normal sounds could feel so different after 5 little words. "We got married yesterday." That was the moment everything changed. Not with shouting, not with doors slamming, just with silence. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Every now and then I repeated her words in my mind to see if they would feel different the second time, the third time, the 10th time. They didn't, but I kept repeating them anyway, trying to understand what I had missed, what had pushed my son away far enough to hide something so important. Some stories don't break open all at once. They unfold slowly, piece by piece. And that morning was only the beginning. The next morning, the sun rose the same way, gentle and quiet, as if the world didn't know what had happened the day before. I got out of bed slowly, feeling heavier than usual, and made myself a small breakfast. The biscuits from yesterday were still sitting on the counter, untouched. I packed them into a container and placed them in the freezer. Something about leaving them out felt wrong, like I was holding on to a moment that had already slipped away. I sat on the porch with my coffee, letting the warm air settle around me. I watched a couple of neighbors walking their dogs and old Mr. Carter sweeping his driveway the way he did every morning. Life moved on as if nothing had shifted, but inside me, something had changed in a quiet, irreversible way. As I rocked gently in my old porch chair, my mind drifted back to the day I first met Hannah. It had been almost 2 years earlier. A warm southern afternoon with birds singing and the sun glowing over the magnolia tree in the front yard. I was sitting on this same porch when James pulled into the driveway in his dusty pickup truck. He had the biggest smile on his face, the kind a mother can spot from a mile away. But when he stepped aside and helped Hannah down from the truck, I knew instantly she meant something special to him. She was shy, with soft brown hair and a quiet way about her. She wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, but she carried herself gently, like she didn't want to disturb the world too much. I offered her a seat on the porch and a glass of sweet tea, and she accepted it with both hands, like she was holding something fragile. That afternoon, Hannah talked softly about her job at a bakery down the road and how she liked small towns because they felt safe. She smiled every time James looked at her, and it warmed my heart to see him so happy. They were good together, or so I thought. I had no reason back then to imagine anything different. In those early months, I tried my best to welcome her into our family. I invited them for Sunday dinners, sent leftovers home with them, and picked up little things from the farmer's market I thought they might enjoy. Hannah was always polite, always kind, but she kept a quiet distance, one I believed time would eventually soften. But the distance didn't soften. It grew. It started small, missed dinners, shorter visits, long pauses in our conversations. I tried not to worry. I told myself young couples needed space, needed to build their own routines. But every week something felt just slightly off. Not wrong, just different. There was one Sunday in particular I still remember clearly. I had spent all afternoon cooking pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the way James always asked for growing up. I set the table, lit a small candle, and even made peach cobbler because it was his favorite. 5 o'clock came, then 5:30, then 6. My phone stayed silent. Finally, at 6:15, James texted, "Sorry, Ma, we can't make it tonight. Maybe another time." I sat down at the table and stared at the meal I had poured my heart into. There was no anger in me, just a quiet ache that settled in my chest, spreading slowly like a shadow at dusk. I packed everything into containers, placed them in the freezer, and washed the dishes in near silence. That was the night I started to feel like a guest in my own son's life. A few weeks after that, I decided to visit their apartment, not to intrude, just to drop off a basket of fresh muffins from the bakery. When I knocked on their door, I heard voices inside, low and muffled. Then suddenly, silence. After a moment, Hannah cracked the door open. "Hi, May," she said softly. "Hi, honey. I brought something for you both." "Oh, thank you," she whispered, taking the basket. Without opening the door wider, "James isn't home." "That's all right. Just tell him I said hello." She nodded, but she didn't invite me in, not even for a minute. I walked back to my car feeling like someone had gently pushed me away without using their hands. The sun was setting, casting long orange lines across the pavement, and the air smelled like honeysuckle. It should have been a beautiful evening, but something inside me felt hollow. I didn't tell James about that day. I didn't want to add tension to his life. I didn't want him to feel pulled between me and his wife. So I let it go, or at least tried to. I convinced myself that every family goes through growing pains, but deep down I knew the distance wasn't temporary. It was turning into something else, something quiet but permanent. I began to speak less, invite less, expect less. When love hurts quietly, you learn to shrink yourself just a little. By the time Hannah came to my door on that soft morning, standing on the porch with her careful voice and her practiced words, the distance had already become a kind of truth between us. I just didn't realize how far I had gone until she said, "We got married yesterday." That was the moment the silence between us became a line I couldn't cross anymore. The days after that phone call felt heavier than I expected. I kept replaying Hannah's voice in my mind, soft but distant, almost like she was speaking through a closed door. I tried telling myself it didn't mean anything, that maybe she was just busy or tired, but there was an uneasy feeling in my chest that wouldn't go away, the kind that follows you from room to room. Even the quiet of my house started to sound different, like the air itself knew something had changed. I woke up early the next morning and walked out to the porch, just like I always do. The sun wasn't fully up yet, and the sky had that gentle orange tint that makes the world look softer than it really is. I sat in my old rocker, wrapping my hands around my warm coffee mug, hoping the day would bring me some clarity. Usually the morning breeze calms me, but that day it felt colder, like it carried a message I wasn't ready to hear. I sipped my coffee slower than usual, trying to steady my breathing. By midday, my thoughts were tangled up so badly that I couldn't stay still anymore. I decided to drive into town, hoping a little movement and some familiar faces might settle me. The drive along the old 2-lane road was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets your thoughts get loud. Every mile felt like a reminder of how different life becomes once your children start building their own world without you. And that hurt in a way I wasn't ready to admit yet. I pulled into the small grocery store on Main Street, the one with the faded blue roof and the old bell on the door that rings every time someone walks in. Mrs. Patterson was behind the register, her glasses sitting low on her nose the way they always do. She smiled when she saw me, but somehow that smile made my chest ache more. It reminded me of how long it had been since someone asked me how I was doing in a way that didn't feel rushed. I nodded and smiled back, even though I felt a little hollow inside. As I picked up a few things, milk, eggs, bread, the usual, I kept thinking about how fast life changes. One day you're teaching your son how to tie his shoes, and the next he's a grown man who doesn't tell you he's married. The weight of that thought stayed with me, heavy in a way I couldn't shake off. I didn't know who to talk to about it, not really. Folks in town are kind, but private matters stay private, especially when it comes to family. When I got back home, the house felt even quieter than before. I set the groceries down on the counter and leaned against it, letting my mind drift back to that strange conversation the day before. Something didn't add up. James was never the type to hide things, and he always kept me in the loop, even about small things. The silence between us now didn't feel natural. I walked into the living room and sat on the couch, taking a deep breath, the way my mother taught me when life got overwhelming. You breathe slow, or the world will outrun you. I tried doing that now, letting the air move gently in and out, hoping my thoughts would calm. But they didn't. They just settled into a quiet ache at the center of my chest. Around late afternoon, the sky turned a little cloudy, hinting at rain, and I found myself staring at my phone. I kept thinking maybe James would call back, or maybe he'd send a message explaining everything. But the screen stayed still, cold and blank, like it didn't have anything left to give me. I picked it up and put it down several times, unsure whether to call him again or leave it alone. I ended up calling, even though something inside me whispered not to. The phone rang 3 times, then 4, and finally went to voicemail. Hearing his voice on that recording nearly broke me. His tone was upbeat, warm, familiar, everything I wasn't getting from him in real life. I hung up before I could leave a message, afraid my voice might crack if I tried speaking. That night, I sat by the window while a soft rain began tapping against the glass. It wasn't a heavy storm, just a steady, gentle drizzle that made the whole world feel small and quiet. I watched it fall, thinking about how many storms I'd weathered in my life, big and small. But somehow this one, this emotional storm, felt different. It felt like it came from inside, not outside. I eventually pulled myself away from the window and heated up a small bowl of soup for dinner. I barely tasted it. My mind kept drifting to James and Hannah, wondering what their day looked like, wondering if they were talking about me. The thought stung more than I wanted to admit because a part of me feared the answer. After dinner, I walked around the house turning off lights, one by one. Each room felt like it held a different memory of raising James. The kitchen, where he used to dance around while I cooked. The hallway, where he'd run down with his little blanket trailing behind him. His old bedroom, still holding the echo of his childhood. Every memory pressed against me, reminding me of a time when he still needed me. I ended up sitting on the edge of my bed, feeling the weight of the silence. I whispered a small prayer, asking for strength or guidance or anything that could help me understand what was happening. I didn't ask for things to go back to the way they were. Life doesn't work like that. I just wanted clarity, something I could hold on to, something that made sense. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy but determined heart. I knew I couldn't sit in that uncertainty forever. So I decided I would drive to their place, at least to see how they were doing. It wouldn't be dramatic or emotional. I just wanted to feel close to my son again, even if only from the outside of their home. I needed that more than I could explain. I took my time getting ready, brushing my hair the way James always liked, soft and neat. I put on a simple blouse and my comfortable shoes. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but I didn't want to look careless either. Mothers still care about those small things, even when our children are grown, especially then. As I grabbed my keys and purse, I paused in the doorway for a moment. My house felt extra quiet, almost like it was waiting for me to decide something big. I closed the door gently behind me and walked to my car, feeling both nervous and hopeful. The gravel crunched under my steps in a way that reminded me of all the mornings I used to drive James to school. Funny how sounds can bring memories back so quickly. The drive to their apartment complex wasn't long, just about 15 minutes, but it felt like the longest drive I'd taken in years. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my heart wasn't as calm. I kept imagining what I might say to them and what I hoped they might say back. The closer I got, the more my chest tightened. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw James's truck right away. Seeing it there made my heart swell and ache all at once. It meant he was home. It meant I was close. I sat there in my car for a few seconds, staring at the truck, letting myself breathe through the nerves. "You can do this," I whispered. "You her mother." I stepped out of the car and walked slowly toward their building. The air smelled like rain from the night before, fresh and soft. I reached the stairs that led up to their apartment and took them one at a time. When I finally stood in front of their door, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the wood, unsure whether to knock or turn around and go back home. But love makes you brave in quiet ways. So I knocked, soft at first, then a little louder. The sound echoed down the hallway, and for a moment everything felt still. I waited, feeling my heart thump slowly in my chest. I heard footsteps after a moment, gentle ones, not rushed. The door opened, and it was Hannah standing there. She looked surprised, maybe even uncomfortable, though she tried to hide it with a polite smile. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore a soft yellow sweater that made her look warm and young. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stared at each other, both unsure who should speak first. Finally, she whispered, "Oh, May, I wasn't expecting you." And in that moment, I felt something shift deep inside me. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet realization. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for a long time. When Hannah opened that door, the hallway light hit her face in a soft way, making every emotion she was trying to hide easy for me to see. She wasn't angry, and she wasn't cold, but she was uneasy, like she wasn't sure if I was supposed to be there, standing on that welcome mat with hope in my eyes. I offered her a small smile, the kind mothers give when they're trying to make things easy for everyone else. She stepped back a little, just enough for me to understand that I could come inside, but not enough for me to feel wanted. The apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon and warm candle wax, the kind of smell that makes a home feel lived in. But when I stepped inside, it didn't feel like my son lived there. There were no pictures of him as a boy on the wall, nothing familiar, nothing from home. Everything was neat, soft, modern, Hannah's taste, not his. And for the first time, I realized how much he had changed his world without even telling me. She closed the door gently behind me and stood with her hands clasped in front of her, like she was bracing herself. "James isn't here," she said quietly. Her voice was polite, but distant, like she was choosing every word with caution. I nodded and pretended it didn't sting, but it did, because the truck outside said otherwise. I walked further in, giving myself a few seconds to take in their life. A soft gray couch, a small dining table with 2 chairs, and a plant in the corner, trying its best to thrive under filtered sunlight. I stood near the couch, not sitting, waiting for Hannah to guide the moment. She didn't. She just watched me with the same worried expression she had at the door. "He's resting," she finally said. "He worked late last night." I nodded again, pretending I believed every word. I didn't want to embarrass her. I didn't want to embarrass myself. but the whole room felt heavy with something unsaid. I cleared my throat and spoke softly. I just wanted to check on y'all. It's been a few days since we talked. She looked away for a moment, then back at me, her expression tightening. Yes, it's been busy. A lot has been going on. Her tone wasn't unkind, just final, closed, like she was giving me a boundary wrapped in politeness. I looked toward the hallway, wondering if James was really sleeping or if he just didn't want to face me. A mother knows her child's habits, even when they're grown, even when they've drifted away. Something in my heart whispered that he was awake, maybe even listening, maybe hiding. That thought made my chest ache in a quiet, unbearable way. I finally sat down on the edge of the couch, smoothing my hands on my lap. "Hannah," I said gently, "I'm not here to bother you. I just wanted to feel close for a moment." Her eyes softened, but only for a second. "I know, May, I know your heart, but things are complicated right now." The way she said complicated made my stomach tighten. Because that word, soft as it sounded, told me I wasn't part of whatever was happening. I opened my mouth to ask something, anything, but instead I heard a quiet sound from the hallway. A soft shift of weight, a footstep, a breath. I looked toward the hallway, and a moment later, James appeared. His hair was messy, his t-shirt wrinkled, and his expression surprised, but it wasn't the surprise of someone waking up unexpectedly. It was the surprise of someone who didn't think I'd show up at all. Someone who wasn't ready to explain himself. "Mom?" he said quietly. Not warm, not cold, just unsure. I stood up slowly, letting my eyes rest on him. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered. He walked a little closer, but didn't open his arms, didn't reach for me the way he used to. He stopped a few feet away and rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "I didn't know you were coming," he said. "I know," I replied gently. "I just wanted to see you." The air between us was tight, almost fragile. I felt like one wrong word could make everything shatter. Hannah stepped closer to him, not touching him, just standing near enough for him to feel her presence. And I understood something in that moment. They were united in something I wasn't part of. Something they didn't want to tell me. I sat back down, and James sat across from me, leaving Hannah standing behind him. "Mom," James began, "there's something we need to talk about." My heart dropped a little. Conversations that start like that almost never end softly. I folded my hands in my lap and nodded. "I'm listening, baby." He took a slow breath. "We didn't tell you about the wedding because we weren't sure how to include you." The words hit me like a quiet blow. Not loud, not sharp, but deep. I stared at him, surprised, hurt, but holding myself together the way mothers do when they don't want their children to carry their pain. "Why wouldn't you be sure?" I whispered. He didn't answer right away. He looked at Hannah, then back at me. Hannah spoke instead. "It wasn't personal," she said. "We just wanted something small, simple, and we thought you might want something different." Something in me cracked a little, not broken, just cracked, because they didn't know me at all if they thought I wanted something fancy. My love was simple, always had been, always would be. I forced a small smile. I would have been happy with anything, as long as I could be there.
James shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. "He wouldn't want to disappoint you," he said softly, "so we just didn't tell you." There it was. The truth. Not sharp, not cruel, just heartbreaking in the way only honesty can be. "It hurt me," I whispered, my voice barely steady. "But I understand you had your reasons." He looked at me then, finally meeting my eyes, and in that glance I saw guilt, confusion, and something that looked like love, but love with distance layered over it. Before I could say anything else, Hannah stepped forward. "May, there's more you should know." Her voice shook just a little, and that scared me more than anything else. I turned to her slowly, bracing myself. "We didn't tell you sooner because we didn't think you'd want to be part of our life the way it is now." The room went still. Absolutely still. Even the air felt shocked into silence. My mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out, because those words didn't make sense. Not with the years I spent raising James, the nights I stayed up helping with school projects, the mornings I made pancakes shaped like little hearts, not with the love that ran through every part of motherhood. James tried to speak. "Hannah," but she held her hand up, trembling only slightly. "No, she deserves the truth." And then she looked at me with eyes that weren't cruel, but weren't soft either. Eyes that carried decisions I didn't know they had made. "May," she said in a quiet, steady voice, "we got married yesterday because we wanted to start fresh. Just us. Without anyone else influencing things. Without outside expectations." Outside expectations. That was who I was to them. Not family, not love, not roots or comfort or history, just outside expectations.
My breath caught in my throat, but I kept my face calm. My mother taught me to keep my dignity, even when my heart felt like breaking. And standing there in that small living room, I understood something very clearly. I was no longer part of the world my son was building. I was welcome to visit, to smile, to be polite, but not to belong. James leaned forward, guilt written all over him. "Mom, please don't take it the wrong way." I held up my hand gently. "Baby," I whispered, "there's only one way to take it." Silence filled the room again, as heavy as the sky before a storm. I stood slowly, smoothing my blouse, steadying my breath with quiet strength. "I won't make things harder for y'all," I said softly. "I just wanted to understand. And now I do." Hannah swallowed hard but said nothing. James looked like he wanted to reach for me, to take the words back, but he didn't move. And that was the real answer. I stepped toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. The apartment felt warmer behind me than the hallway ahead. But I walked anyway, because love sometimes means stepping back, even when it hurts more than staying. Before I left, I turned to James and whispered, "I love you, sweetheart, always." His lips trembled. He said, "I love you too, Mom," but the words felt thin, like something said out of memory, not closeness. I walked out the door, and it closed behind me with a soft, final click. And in that quiet moment in the hallway, I realized that was the exact second everything changed. When I stepped out into the hallway, the air felt cooler than it should have, like the building itself knew something inside me had changed. I held onto the railing as I walked down the stairs, not because I needed the support, but because I was trying to steady the ache inside my chest. The afternoon sun was bright, too bright, almost disrespectful to the heaviness I carried with me. I made my way toward my car slowly, letting each step settle my breath. By the time I reached the door, my hands were trembling just a little. I sat inside for a moment before starting the engine, resting my forehead gently on the steering wheel. I wasn't crying, not yet. The tears stayed tucked behind my eyes, waiting for a place where no one could see them. I whispered to myself softly, "Just breathe, May." It was the same advice I gave James when he scraped his knees as a boy. The drive home felt longer than I remembered. Every turn in the road carried an old memory of him, his laughter, his small hands gripping the back of my seat as he leaned forward, pointing out cows in the fields. I tried to remind myself that he was a grown man now, making his own choices, building a life that didn't need me in it the way it once did. But knowing that and feeling it were two very different things, and the feeling hurt in a quiet, deep way. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked the same as it always did, still, warm, waiting. But it didn't feel the same. Something in me had shifted on that short drive back, something small but permanent. I stepped onto the porch and took a deep breath, letting the familiar scent of pine and old wood calm me. Then I walked inside and closed the door behind me, letting the silence wrap around me like an old blanket. I set my keys on the kitchen counter and placed my purse in its usual spot by the chair. I moved slowly, almost gently, as if everything in my house had turned fragile. The quiet felt different now, not peaceful, but hollow. I walked to the sink and washed my hands, watching the water run over my fingers, grounding myself in the rhythm of something simple. After a moment, I sat down at the small kitchen table, the same table where James once worked on homework after school. I traced my fingers along the surface, remembering the days when he couldn't sit still for more than 5 minutes. I told myself that love changes, that it grows and stretches and sometimes thins, but deep down, I wondered if it was supposed to thin this much, if mothers were meant to feel this kind of distance. Eventually, I made myself a cup of tea, though I barely tasted it. I sat in the living room, staring out the window at the quiet street. A part of me wanted to be angry, to feel something sharper, something easier to hold. But anger never came. Instead, what came was a slow, aching acceptance, the kind that sits with you quietly and waits for you to acknowledge it. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned a soft shade of gold, I finally let myself cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow, steady release of everything I'd been holding on to. The tears ran down my cheeks silently, falling into my lap, and I let them come without stopping them. Sometimes tears aren't weakness. Sometimes they're just the body's way of making room for something new. When the crying stopped, I wiped my face and breathed deeply, feeling a small bit of clarity settle in. I told myself that I couldn't force my way into their life, not as a mother trying to protect her child, and not as a woman still learning how to be alone. I could only love them from a distance, gently and without expectation. Love doesn't disappear just because it has nowhere to go.
The next morning, I woke up early, even before the birds started singing. The house was still and cool, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I made breakfast quietly, frying a couple of eggs and toasting a slice of bread. The food tasted simple and steady, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel rushed or anxious. I was just present. Later that day, I decided to clean the house, not because it needed it, but because I needed the distraction. I dusted the shelves, rearranged a few books, folded the blankets on the couch. With each small task, I felt a bit lighter, like I was putting small pieces of myself back in order. By afternoon, the sun filled the living room with soft light, and I sat on the couch with a gentle sense of peace. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was something close to acceptance. In the days that followed, I didn't hear from James or Hannah, and I didn't call them either, not out of pride or anger, but out of respect. They had made it clear they needed space, space from expectations, space from family, space from me. And even though it hurt, I understood. People grow in different directions, and sometimes the branches of a family tree stretch further apart than we'd like. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch, I watched a neighbor's boy ride his bike up and down the street. His mother called after him, warning him to slow down, and I smiled at the familiar scene. Childhood passes so quickly, and we don't always realize it until years later when we're sitting alone in a quiet house. I whispered softly, "You did your best, May." And I meant it. A few days later, I decided to take a long walk down the old dirt road behind my house. The trees were starting to turn golden, and the leaves crunched softly under my feet. The fresh air cleared my mind in a way nothing else could. As I walked, I talked to God in small, whispered sentences. I asked for strength, peace, and guidance. And most of all, I asked for love to stay in my heart, even if it couldn't stay close. When I returned home, I found a small envelope in my mailbox. My heart quickened when I saw James's handwriting. It wasn't thick with words, just a simple note. "Mom, I'm sorry. I just need time to figure things out. I love you. Down. I love you. James." I held the note gently, letting the words settle over my heart like a thin blanket. It wasn't everything I wanted. It wasn't an apology that fixed the hurt, but it was something, a piece of him reaching out, even if his hand didn't stretch far. I sat on the porch for a long time, the letter pressed against my chest. The sun warmed my face, and for a moment, I felt the tiniest spark of hope. Not the kind that jumps or glows brightly, but the quiet kind, the kind that hums softly beneath the surface, reminding you that nothing stays the same forever. That evening, I wrote him back. I kept my note short too, simple and gentle, without any pressure. "James, take all the time you need. I'm here when you're ready. Love, Mom." I didn't ask questions. I didn't bring up the wedding. I didn't bring up the hurt. I just let love do what love does: stay steady, patient, and kind. After sending the letter, I felt a calmness spread through me. I realized that I couldn't change their choices, but I could choose how I carried them. I could choose grace. I could choose gentleness. I could choose love without expectation. Weeks passed slowly, but peacefully. I filled my days with small routines: watering plants, cooking warm meals, taking evening walks, and calling friends I hadn't talked to in a while. I started reading more, watching old movies, and sitting by the window during storms. Life didn't feel empty anymore. It felt quiet, steady, and mine.
One Saturday morning, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, I realized something important. I wasn't waiting anymore, not in the way I had been, not with fear or desperation, but with quiet hope, the kind that doesn't rush or demand, the kind that trusts life to unfold when it's ready. My heart was healing, not because the world fixed itself, but because I let it. And that was enough. The days settled into a gentle rhythm after that. I woke up early, brewed my coffee, and sat on the porch, watching the sun rise over the quiet street. The world didn't feel smaller or lonelier. It felt steady. Life had not gone back to the way it was, and it never would. But that was okay. I had learned to carry love without needing it returned in the way I once expected. Sometimes I still thought of James and Hannah, imagining what they were doing. I wondered if they remembered my smile, my hands folded over biscuits I had baked, the quiet words of encouragement I had always offered. I didn't dwell in sadness anymore, though. I let the memories sit softly in my heart, like a photo on the wall, always there, but never heavy enough to break me. One afternoon, while walking past the park near my house, I saw a mother pushing her child on the swings. The little boy laughed loudly, and the wind carried the sound across the field. I paused for a moment, letting the laughter fill the quiet corners of my chest. It reminded me that life keeps moving, that love keeps flowing, and that joy can be found even after hurt. That day, I smiled freely, not because anything had changed outside, but because something had shifted inside me. I realized that being a mother doesn't end with birthdays or weddings. It doesn't end when children grow up or move into new homes. Being a mother is a quiet, steady thing. It's a presence that continues, even when your child doesn't notice every day. It's patience. It's forgiveness. It's hope that love can endure, even in silence and distance. That evening, I sat on my porch again, the sky painted in soft oranges and purples. I held my teacup with both hands and breathed in slowly, letting the warmth fill me. I whispered a small prayer, not for reconciliation, not for answers, but for peace, for the courage to carry love without needing it back, for the strength to remain gentle in a world that sometimes feels indifferent, and for the heart to keep opening even when it hurts. Because love, real love, is quiet and enduring. It does not demand, it does not cling, and it does not break under distance. It simply stays. And that is enough. As the night fell and the first stars appeared, I felt a warmth deep inside me. I knew life would keep moving forward for all of us, James, Hannah, and me. But I also knew that my heart had found its own peace. I had learned to let go without giving up, to love without holding, to be patient and gentle, even when the world didn't give me the closure I longed for. And that was the quiet miracle of it all. Thanks for your watching. I'm looking forward to your comments on this story. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.